Okay, 1.6. We're going to continue to solve equations. We're going to use everything that we have learned already. We're going to use our quadratic formula. We're going to factor, all the fun stuff. So looking at number 1, what should I do first to solve here? Any suggestions? We don't want to divide out the x because that would get rid of one of our solutions. But I want to move everything to one side because I'm probably going to have to factor here. So if I have x to the 5th power, I'm going to subtract the 9x cubed to the other side and get it equal to 0. Remember, if we're going to factor, we need it to be equal to 0. So now, what would I do next? If I have 2 terms, how could I factor here?
Combine.
No. Can I combine them? Take out the GCF. Can't combine them because they're not like terms, but we want to take out the GCF. What's our GCF? X cubed. So then I'm left with x squared minus 9 equals 0. Can we factor this anymore? Are you sure? X squared minus 9 is the difference of squares, so what does it factor into? X plus 3 and x minus 3. Once we factor all the way, here it's asking us to solve, not just factor. So what's the next step I have to do to solve? Set each piece equal to 0. So x to the 3rd power equals 0. X minus 3 equals 0, and x plus 3 equals 0. Each part we have to set equal to 0. Now we just treat each little equation separately and solve each one. So for our first one, x cubed equals 0, how would I solve? Take the cubed root. What's the cubed root of 0? 0. So x equals 0 is one of our answers. For the second one, we can add 3 to both sides. So x is equal to 3. And the third one, we'd subtract 3 on both sides. So x is equal to negative 3. So those are 3 solutions. Let's look at the next one. What should I do to solve? Let's take out the GCF. What's our GCF? Can I divide 6 by 4?
Would it be negative?
Let's take out a negative 2x. When we're factoring, we would really prefer if our leading coefficient is positive. We can always factor when it's negative, but it's just going to make our lives a little bit easier if it is positive. So let's take out the negative 2x just to make our leading coefficient positive. So negative 2x goes on the outside. When I divide that out, I'm left with 3x squared plus 10x minus 8. So now I want to see if I can factor the inside parentheses. How would I try to factor this? Awesome, we multiply the first times the last. So we took out the GCF, we ignore that, it just stays outside until the end. So we're only looking at factoring inside the parentheses. Let's try multiplying our first times the last. We get negative 24. Do we have 2 factors of negative 24 that add to 10? 12 and negative 2? Perfect. That works. So this factors into x plus 12 and x minus 2. Anytime we multiply the first times the last, what do we have to remember to do? Divide by the number we started multiplying with. So we divide by 3. So 12 divided by 3 is 4. So we have negative 2x times x plus 4. Here, if it doesn't divide, we can move the 3 in front of the x. So 3x minus 2. What would we do next to solve? Set each piece equal to 0. So negative 2x equals 0, x plus 4 equals 0, and 3x minus 2 equals 0. So we get x is equal to 0. Here, x is equal to negative 4. And then the third one, I'd add 2 to both sides. So we get 3x equals 2, divide by 3. X is equal to 2 over 3. So these would be our 3 answers. We notice here we had x cubed, so we had 3 solutions. The one kind of difference that it might not happen is here we had x to the 5th power, so that kind of tells us we should have 5 solutions, but 3 of those solutions ended up just being 0. So we had those 3 zeros and 2 more. So whatever your highest degree is, that tells you the amount of solutions that you will have. Sometimes they can be imaginary, sometimes they'll be just a bunch of zeros. All right, let's look at the next one. I have 4 terms. How do I factor? Grouping. Group the first 2, group the second 2. What's the GCF in my first group? X squared. So we're going to take out an x squared. That goes to the outside. What are we left with? X plus 3. What's the GCF in our second group? Negative 4. So we take out a negative 4. I'm left with x plus 3. What would I do next? Awesome. We need our inside parentheses to be exactly the same because they're going to go together as 1, x plus 3. And then our 2 outside parts go together. So we have an x squared minus 4. Can we factor this anymore? Difference of squares. So x squared minus 4 factors into an x plus 2, x minus 2. So we have x plus 3 times x plus 2 times x minus 2. What would I do next to solve? Set each piece equal to 0. So x plus 3 equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0. So x is equal to negative 3, negative 2, and positive 2. All right, we have 4 terms here. What do? Group them. So take out the GCF of our first group. What's our GCF in the first group? X squared. What are we left with when we take out an x squared? 4x minus 3. What's our GCF in the second group? 4? Negative 4. Why do we want it negative 4? Because we need to flip the signs. We need our parentheses to be exactly the same, so we got to flip the signs. So we're going to take out a negative 4. So that makes this a 4x minus 3. Inside parentheses are exactly the same, which is what we were looking for. So those are going to get grouped together. And then the outside parts are going to get grouped together. X squared minus 4. Can we factor this anymore? Difference of squares. So this factors into an x plus 2, x minus 2. So we have a 4x minus 3 times x plus 2 times x minus 2. What would I do next to solve? Set them all equal to 0. So 4x minus 3 equals 0. X plus 2 equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. So our first answer, we get x is equal to 3 over 4 when we solve our little equation there. Second one, we get x is equal to negative 2. Third one, x is equal to positive 2. So those would be our 3 solutions. If you notice, we started with x cubed. The highest degree that you have is going to most likely be the amount of solutions you have. So here we had 3 solutions. Here We started with x cubed, so we had 3 solutions. All right, we have a lot more examples on this page. They're all worked out in the completed notes, but I want to do a few of them with you. Do you guys have any suggestions of which ones you want to do? Looking at this, do you want to practice more grouping, practice more with just 2 terms? Any suggestions? Let's do number 5. So 5, our leading coefficient's 1, so we can just factor it normally. What are 2 factors of 144 that add to 24? 12 and 12. So this factors into x plus 12 times x plus 12. Now, not only do we have to factor, but we have to solve, so we can't just stop here. What would I do next? Set them each equal to 0. So x plus 12 equals 0, x plus 12 equals 0. So x is equal to negative 12 and negative 12. So these are the same answer. You don't have to write it twice because it's the same thing. Those are our 2 solutions. Let's look at 16 on the bottom. What would I do first to solve 16? We can subtract 16 and move it to the other side. So you guys had a question like this, similar to this on the quiz yesterday. So if you just have an x squared, you want to get that all by itself, move the number to the other side. What would we do next? Take the square root of both sides. So x is equal to what? Plus or minus 4i. So the square root of 16 is 4, but because we have that negative, we have to make it an i. So plus or minus 4i. So those are 2 answers here.